It's an honor to be with you today at the Baptist World Alliance. I'm excited to speak to you about why religious freedom matters to all faiths. Now, as Baptists, this should be nothing new to us. We were raised on this stuff. It's one of the core essentials of what it means to be a Baptist, religious freedom. And when we look at church history, we've got to go all the way back 400 years ago. You know, people talk in America about 400 years ago. Our country in many ways was birthed in racism and slavery and other things. It's true. But it wouldn't be true had Roger Williams won the argument. John Winthrop won it. It was the ideology of Roger Williams that said there should be no slaves and we should barter with the Indians and bargain with them to buy the land. It was also Roger Williams who said there's something called soul freedom or soul consciousness, the idea that each soul is competent before God and should have the ability to decide to follow God. And so this freedom was something that he passionately believed in. Winthrop, on the other hand, said, no, we want religious freedom for us. And it was Winthrop and that group that said slavery's okay and we're just taking the land. It's ours. The reality, though, is it was Roger Williams' ideas that impacted John Locke, that impacted the writing of our Constitution. It was those ideas that went into play of religious freedom. And so why does it matter to everyone? Well, first of all, because it's your mind. And the idea of soul consciousness means that each one of us can stand before God with our own reason and faculty and make a decision. Now, we're responsible for that choice. But nonetheless, we each have to make that choice. I'm sorry to say that there are some people in our tribe that believe the best way to have religious freedom is to keep people isolated from other religions. But if that's how you're going to keep your faith strong, it's a very weak faith. It's important so that we can have religious freedom. If we believe in religious freedom, we have to practice it. When people know that we believe in religious freedom for all faiths, it impacts what happens to the minorities that are Baptist, whether it's the Chen or the Korean or Baptists that are all over the world that face persecution. It's powerful to be able to say, well, we believe in this for Buddhists and we believe in this for Muslims, and we're going to stand up for this. So it's critical because it's soul consciousness. It's critical because it gives our own religious freedom. It's important because it provides for the religious freedom for minorities. And here's something else that it does. It is the greatest thing that we have to push against religious persecution. I have the honor and privilege of working with one of the leading rabbis in America, Ambassador for Religious Freedom under President Obama, Rabbi David Saperstein. Also working with one of the top imams in the United States. That's one of the largest mosques in the US, about 30,000 people. He's a multi-site mosque. You understand that when we go into a country together and it's a Muslim country and Imam Majid begins to speak and he challenges that country and he says, look, I have Bob Roberts with me and he's one of the biggest fighters for religious freedom in America. And he teaches that Muslims should have their freedom and he stood up for us and he's taken hits over it. Do you understand the power of that? When he says, now look, you're not treating Baptists right. You're not treating Christians right in this country. When this man is fighting for our tribe's religious freedom, you need to do something. It's one thing for a white Baptist to show up on his own to say, hey, you've got Baptists there and we know it and we're going to push you. Quite another thing when a Muslim, leading Muslim in the world, comes and visits with a diplomat who's Muslim or in a Muslim nation and says something needs to be done here. There's power when we work together. We know what it's like to work as a tribe. We have very little understanding of the power that there is when we work together across religious lines. It's a game changer. Majid and David and I came up with this crazy idea a few years ago. What if we were to first get evangelical pastors, which have the most negative view of Muslims in the world and the US, and what if we get Muslims who are also nervous about evangelicals because, especially Baptists, they know we want to convert everybody. What if we actually did a retreat with them? And so we did. The first day, hardly no one spoke to one another. They were very nervous. By the third day, they were laughing. They became friends. What happened? Did we Baptist evangelicals discover a new verse, or did the Muslims discover a new verse in their Quran? Neither happened. Here's what happened. There's an old verse. It says, love your neighbor. And we just did it. And do you know what we discovered? We liked our neighbor. Now, we didn't disagree with our neighbor on everything. Not at all. Majid always tries to tell me, we believe Jesus is born of a virgin and that he performed miracles and that he was the Messiah and that he's coming back again. I always say, fantastic, Majid. Now, what about that he died on the cross for the sins of the world and that he rose again? He'll start laughing and says, no, we don't believe that. So there are some differences that we're always going to have that are going to be radically different. But man, they make a difference. Then David helped us as we begin to bring rabbis into that conversation. But we've now done retreats in the U.S. and all over the world. We have work now in 24 cities in the U.S. And this next year, we've already in the previous years been to Pakistan and Uzbekistan and Morocco and the Emirates. But now we're going to be going to Kazakhstan and Sudan and Nigeria and some other very sensitive places. We understand what we believe about religious freedom, and we know why it's important. Here's what I would say to you. I want people to be a follower of Jesus and to be a Baptist, not because they don't know that there's other options, but because they live in a world where all the options are present. And through reason and the enlightenment of the Holy Spirit, their response would be, why would I want to be anything else but a follower of Jesus? So don't be nervous about religious freedom. A lot of times we worry about it, but it's our biggest opportunity. Our reason is solid. Our God is strong. Our doctrine is a foundation. There's no reason to fear. Separation of church and state even encourages that, because it means that each faith must stand on its own feet and not be driven by law, but by heart and mind and reason. So I challenge you, let's be good Baptists. Let's hold on to what we believe about religious freedom for all people. Makes the world a better place. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. It's not just a matter of me working with people so I can share the good news of Jesus, but here's another question I've had to ask myself. What is the value of being in relationships with people that will never accept him? Here's my response. It matters, of profound significance, because what it means is I will always be in relationship and I will always be a witness, not just by my words, but by my life. It also means that people have a chance to follow Jesus based on not just what they hear me say, but how they see me live and how I treat other people. Let's live true to the principle of religious freedom and soul competency before God. Thank you.
Leading the persecuted church, really, it's a kind of sadness. The leaders who have been leading the church, some of them, I can't find them. They got killed or murdered. And biblically, it is what it's written. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. Jesus said that. And it's not new for us, but it is really a very tough time as a leader to see your disciples or the disciples of Jesus Christ whom you trained, when you go back there, they are not there. They got killed or they have been imprisoned. It's tough, and I am always giving myself an example. I have been, imprisoned, and I have been tortured for the sake of Jesus Christ, that preaching this gospel in the communist and in the Muslim country. For that reason, always I say to people, just be strong and be courage, and also always what it costs, preach Jesus, what it costs, in any cost. And I said this, I make this decision when I was 13, as soon as I became a Christian. At any cost, I will preach the gospel, and that is my motivation, and that is also what I am telling to other people. Persecution, persecution is not a new thing or just which is not written in the Bible. Persecution is written in the Bible and it is there, but here in the western side of the world, there is no any physical persecution. Maybe there is a verbal persecution, in a word or neglecting at workplace or something. But in the third world country, the persecution is physically. For example, they hung me upside down and they pour boiling oil over my feet and they try to kill me. I have some scar on my body, and people, they don't know this is going on. When I spoke at the Senate here in America, most senators, they don't know nothing what is going on in Africa or in Sudan. More than 2 million people got killed about religious persecution in South Sudan and in Nigeria, in Ethiopia. In 50 countries around the world, persecution is going on nowadays, and that is not known. Freedom of religion is the one who brought out that persecution is going on around the world. First and most, what we need as a persecuted Christian, as a persecuted church, a prayer. I want other Christians to pray. The reason the Bible said, pray for the persecuted brothers and sisters as you are a prisoner with them. That's what it said in the Bible. For that reason, people need to pray for the persecuted Christian, and also here in America, in free world, we need to talk. We need to tell to our senators, to our governors, and to our president, to our Senate. We need to tell them how persecution is going on in another country. Otherwise, this democracy, what we have it here, is not going to work in another country if we are not saying something. For anybody who is watching this video or listening my thought, I want to ask them to pray for the persecuted church and also to speak out to the persecuted about the persecuted church. And thank you. God bless you.
Religious freedom is critical to me. It's important to me, whether it's the United States or whether it's internationally, because when someone becomes a follower of Christ, when they receive Christ as their Savior, that person becomes my brother or my sister. And so it is inherent to care about your family. And so wherever they are on the globe, if they are free to serve Him and to practice their faith, that affects me. When they're persecuted and when they're hurt for their faith and practices, that hurts me as well. And I become concerned. Why? Because they're my brothers and sisters in Christ.
Talk about the religious freedom issue is a huge injustice. After the Chinese Communist Party took power in China, especially in the past 5 to 7 years, under the new leadership of President Xi Jinping, the religious persecution in China has reached to the worst level that we have not seen since the Cultural Revolution of Chairman Mao in 1960s. For the first time, we have seen millions of Chinese children, especially Christian children, were forced to even sign a Communist Party prepared form to renounce their faith. Hundreds of thousands of churches were being destroyed, shut down by force, and the crosses of the church building were demolished, burnt, and destroyed. And the Chinese Communist Party would punish those church leaders with from minimum, harassment to long-term imprisonment if you don't comply to those new religious regulations, which even requires them to put a portrait of Chairman Mao or Chairman Xi Jinping on the church stage. And so these kind of things could lead some pastors end up in prison, sentenced to 14 years, 12 years, 9 years, 7 years. I mean, as recent as just a couple of months ago, in 2021, one pastor was sentenced to 4.5 years for simply refusing to put Communist Party symbols into the church building. So this is a huge, of course, injustice, and of course, the worst persecution happened to the Uyghur and Kazakhs and other religious minorities in West China, an area called Xinjiang, Uyghur Autonomous Region, also known internationally as East Turkestan. And the Chinese Communist Party established concentration camps, modern concentration camps. Several hundred of them were established where 1 to 3 million these Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other religious minorities are being put in these concentration camps. It's really repeating under the word, watching what had happened to the Jews. The Holocaust is coming, in during the World War II. So for us as Christians, we how can we sit idly without speaking up? How can we not deliver a cup of water, a piece of bread, a piece of clothes, or even visit the least of our brothers? If we said we are serving the Lord, if we love Jesus, as Jesus said, if you do this to the least of your brothers, you are doing this to me. So that's kind of the conviction for us to address these huge atrocities, genocide, crime against humanity. We live in the free world, still, in the United States of America. At minimum, we can speak up for them, and we can deliver some tangible things to support them, to walk with them, and certainly we can help advocate for them.
The power of God's justice, of God's love, to see the story of it roll out over ages and generations through relationships, and then to be founded in our hearts, to know that the seed of justice is part of the kernel of faith that we carry. Once we are committed to Christ's way, there is no way to be in the world without a hunger for justice, because it is a hungering after God's own heart. May justice roll down like waters. That's a God image. That's a generous image of a generous God pouring out justice. That is our hunger for justice, for us to act. So to be in leadership is to respond to the hunger for justice, and to respond from Scripture and conversion of our hearts to commitment of our actions for justice.
First of all, I believe there's a biblical reason for freedom, period. And that is that, God gave us a choice. He doesn't say you have to follow me. He doesn't make us follow him. We have to choose to follow him. And that's a part of the love relationship. And I think human dignity is built around that freedom that we have. Not that we have to do something, not that someone has to become a Christian because we dictate that to them, but they choose to become a Christian, or whatever religious group it might be. I think that it's a part of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a part of God showing us who we are. And so it's important for us to be holding up that torch of freedom for the world to see that as Christians, we believe in human dignity. We believe in the right of a person to make a decision of what they're going to do with their life. So especially when it comes to faith, because the most personal, intimate decision we'll ever make is that about what we believe about God and who He is. And so freedom for people who are persecuted, we need to be standing with them. We need to love them. Now, we need to pray for those who are persecuting the church. We need to reach out and love those people, but we need to stand with them and say, hey, we are with our brothers. We want to help our brothers. We're not going to just let our brothers be destroyed. We're going to stand by brothers and sisters in Christ and be with them. So I think it's a part of the whole belief system as a Christian that we hold human dignity high, and that means freedom.
I desire religious freedom, but I think the church, the persecution is always intermingled with the church history. And being a Christian, you have already been put into a context that is persecution. Being persecuted for the Lord, that is, take your cross. And those sufferings, sometimes it's not a fun thing, but that make your spiritual growth more solid. And I myself even was at the edge of being burned out several times, and for kind of aloneness or sort of financial support, and sometimes maybe natural of flesh struggles. But those things, when I look backward, I found that makes me more dependent, surrender my life to the Lord. Because the Lord used certain trials in my life, and also wonderful, gracious provision and providence leading in my life. So going through those things make my Christian faith more solid. So I strongly uphold religious freedom, but I hope every Christian should be prepared to suffer for the Lord.
Attractive point about Christianity is God Himself gives us freedom to choose. We tell them, if a nation turns to Christ, doesn't mean we pastors will replace the mullahs forcing you. We're not going to do that, because the fundamental belief of the Bible is you will have a freedom to choose your religion, your political belief, and your personal life. So because I'm working among Muslims and Muslim nations, freedom to choose is a very new concept for them. And once they get it, it's very attractive. And that comes from the Bible. God Himself gives us a choice. He never forces us to be Christians. Jesus says, come to me. Those who are thirsty, come to me. That's an invitation. Those who have heavy burdens in life, come to me. So as a Christian, I teach that even our God does not force us. He gives us a choice. So we need to bring that freedom to choose in Islamic nation. And that's a message I give alongside with the Bible. Religious persecution is a good thing. Actually, we have heard about it's a good thing. It strengthens the church and all that. And we see that in the book of Acts. We see it in persecuted Christians. But also, from another angle I want to talk about, religious persecution happens when Christianity is growing and the enemy is losing, And because they don't have an answer, they turn into violence. So, like in Iran, the persecution in Iran is the result, as a reaction of government towards the growth of Christianity, and they cannot stop it, they cannot control it. They know Christianity is growing. Only way they know is persecution, to bring fear and isolation in the hearts of Christians, trying to slow down the growth, which they're not successful. The more persecution, the faster the church grows. And Iran, as you may know, has the fastest growing evangelical population in the world. So just like the book of Acts, you see that as Christianity grew, persecution grew. Why? Because they were afraid. It's out of fear. Oh, these Christians are going to take over, and we will not have people with us, and we are not going to have power. We're not going to have money on our side. To be advocate of those who are persecuted, we need to think global. The whole world needs to know. And this is a proven strategy. When some of our people, underground church leaders, were in jail, those who we talked about in the media, we talked about it in our website, and those who were well known in the West, in the news in the West, they were less tortured, and they did not dare to execute them because their names was all over. So number one is awareness. The more people are aware, the less those oppressive government dare to kill. If they know nobody's watching, they will do more. Prayer, of course, is always, because we are facing a spiritual dark spirit called Islam. And the Prince of Persia is called by name in the Bible. So we know we need to win in the heavenlies. Prayer for the persecuted church is more than just God save them. As you see in the book of Acts, you see the prayers of the persecuted in the book of Acts is not, please God help us, we are so weak, they're doing us. They pray, God give us boldness. Give us boldness. So pray for the persecuted, not to be silenced, but a supernatural boldness and wisdom as how to shine into darkness.
A graça e a paz, tudo bem? Estou gravando aqui de Petra para vocês. E olha que especial, eu estou numa igreja bizantina, que juntamente com outras duas, foi construída na etapa final da vida dessa cidade, que é a cidade de Petra. Ela existiu e teve seu auge entre o século IV a.C. até o século II depois de Cristo. Mas é no final da era dessa cidade, lá por volta do ano de 649, 650, que essas igrejas que estavam aqui então, se tornaram o que você está vendo aqui. Pois é, essa realidade, a realidade de apenas pedras, como é o nome dessa cidade, mas pedras mortas, é a realidade de muitos dos cristãos, especialmente ao longo de toda a história que aconteceu aqui no Oriente Médio, o berço do cristianismo. E eu quero falar um pouquinho para você sobre isso hoje. Como é que está a igreja no mundo árabe, especialmente no Oriente Médio, nos nossos dias? Vem comigo que eu vou falar um pouquinho para você. A primeira resposta para essa pergunta que eu fiz para vocês é de que a igreja hoje aqui na nossa região é uma igreja perseguida. Talvez você não saiba, mas nos últimos 100 anos de história do cristianismo no Oriente Médio, a igreja caiu de 20% da composição em toda a região para apenas 4%. Cristãos do Iraque, da Síria, de tantos lugares, inclusive aqui na Jordânia, passaram a sofrer perseguição e, aliás, desde o início do cristianismo aqui, porque o próprio Senhor Jesus havia ensinado os discípulos que a perseguição era um valor que eles teriam que carregar na sua jornada como seguidores do Mestre. Não tem como escapar do sofrimento, todos nós vamos ter que carregar uma cruz. E essa é a realidade da igreja no Oriente Médio. Especialmente aqui nesse lugar, essa igreja, ela representa com muita clareza essa história de sofrimento e de dor dos cristãos aqui na nossa região. Aqui congregavam irmãos preciosos foram batizados e louvaram ao nome do Senhor. Mas quando chegou o califado da Almeida e eles começaram a dominar essa região e a arabização começou a se tornar como um dos maiores movimentos para o Oriente Médio, o cristianismo aqui começou a perecer. E essa igreja, juntamente com a cidade de Petra, ali por volta do ano de 650, veio a sua destruição, ao seu abandono. E essa é a realidade dos cristãos hoje aqui nessa região. Cristãos que sofrem perseguição por meio de suas famílias, cristãos que sofrem perseguição por causa das autoridades religiosas e das comunidades ao seu redor, que sofrem perseguição por causa do totalitarismo e da opressão que é imposta para eles nos vários países aqui ao redor. E esse pode ser o resultado, esse pode ser o fim para essa igreja nessa região. Por isso fica o desafio para eu e você conhecermos mais dessa realidade, dessa igreja que hoje é uma das que sofre mais perseguição no mundo. Dos 50 países da classificação de perseguição religiosa da Missão Portas Abertas, por volta de 20 deles são países árabes. E aqui onde nós estamos plantados, servindo ao Senhor, a gente vê dia a dia o sofrimento, a dor, a perseguição, em meio a tudo aquilo que a igreja tem feito para tentar sobreviver e perseverar e avançar com o reino de Deus. Como que a igreja está hoje? Uma igreja perseguida. Bom, a segunda resposta para essa pergunta tão importante para a gente desvendar hoje juntos é de que a igreja aqui no Oriente Médio é uma igreja refugiada. E os números são historicamente avassaladores. São milhões de cristãos que fugiram de suas casas, seja por causa da radicalização que tem acontecido nos últimos anos aqui na região e também de muitos atentados e de opressão e de movimentos que forçaram eles por séculos e séculos a deixar o seio, o berço do cristianismo aqui no Oriente Médio e partir para o Ocidente, para a Austrália, para o Canadá, para os Estados Unidos, para países da Europa. Se você for pegar, por exemplo, o número de cristãos que estavam em Nínive, ali nos arredores de Mossul, antes do Estado Islâmico tomar aquela cidade em 2014, haviam por volta de 125 mil cristãos adorando o Senhor, louvando o nome dele, mas que por causa da pressão e da perseguição tiveram que deixar tudo para trás e fugiram para outros países, inclusive aqui na Jordânia, onde nós trabalhamos com essa igreja, que é uma igreja refugiada. Ore pelos cristãos egípcios, iraquianos, sírios, palestinos, libaneses. Você consegue imaginar que existem mais libaneses no Brasil do que no próprio Líbano? E isso se dá a, historicamente, uma perseguição acirrada que aconteceu contra a comunidade cristã e por décadas de conflito. Essa é a realidade de uma igreja que é refugiada. Agora, talvez, a resposta que mais nos traz esperança é essa última, porque se a pergunta é como é que está a igreja no Oriente Médio hoje, a resposta é de que ela está perseverante. A igreja aqui é uma igreja perseverante, a despeito da perseguição, a despeito do sofrimento, ela continua servindo fielmente ao Senhor Jesus. São tantas histórias que eu poderia contar para você, mas eu me recordo com muita clareza do nosso contato contínuo com cristãos iraquianos, que quando foram desafiados para se tornarem muçulmanos e deixarem a sua fé para trás, para viver debaixo do califado islâmico, eles tomaram a decisão de deixar propriedades, casas, bens, dinheiro, tudo que tinham para manter a sua fé em Cristo Jesus. Esse é o testemunho de milhares e milhares e milhares de irmãos nossos que hoje seguem sofrendo por causa da fé, sendo oprimidos todos os dias, mas que perseveram, crendo que aquele que perseverar até o fim será salvo. E a palavra diz em Apocalipse 3:2, "Sê vigilante e fortaleça o que resta está a ponto de morrer." Então, queridos irmãos, fica o desafio para que eu e você, como parte dessa igreja, a igreja de Jesus Cristo, a gente possa se importar não com as pedras mortas, mas com esses nossos irmãos que estão vivos e sofrendo por causa de Jesus, aqui na nossa região, no Oriente Médio, em tantos lugares do mundo. Mas eu posso dizer para você que a sua oração, a sua contribuição, o seu apoio, a sua visita, o seu encorajamento vai fazer toda a diferença e vai gerar fortalecimento para esses irmãos, especialmente os que estão pagando um preço muito alto para servir a Jesus no meio de um contexto como o nosso aqui. A igreja de Jesus é essa igreja perseverante. Ore para que Deus continue a ajudá-la, dando-lhe forças e para que os frutos venham e ela permaneça firme aqui. Que Deus abençoe sua vida, em nome de Jesus.
Friends, I'm Wati Iyer, convener of the Forum for Naga Reconciliation, known as FNR. I thank you for the opportunity to provide you with a brief history of the FNR. At a time when most Naga areas were seized by factional bloodshed, FNR was christened on March 25, 2008 in Kohima, the capital of Nagaland state, with the support of 39 Naga civil organizations, including apex church bodies. Upon the naming of the FNR, our first commitment was to reach out to the then 4 Naga political groups. This proved to be a difficult task. From March to May 2008, FNR could not find any entry point to the groups. With the storm clouds of conflict hovering above Naga areas, FNR members suffered a lack of trust from the Naga political groups, understandably due to years of accumulated ills and violence. FNR members were looked upon as agents and sympathizers of certain Naga political groups, or as actors at the behest of central government of India. Even the public was not optimistic about the prospect of reconciliation and peace. Against this backdrop of suspicion and fear, for many months and with many prayers, FNR members proceed to traverse back and forth into camps all over Naga regions in India and Burma, known as Myanmar, to meet with different political groups. These journeys took us to remote towns and villages, and we sometimes had to complete our travels by foot, as we have done it in our visit to 2 towns in Burma, Kamti and Dhaka. Quite unexpectedly, on May 2nd, 2008, after relentless effort, we experienced a breakthrough. FNR received a call from the late Esak Chisisu, leader of one Naga political group, telling us that his group was willing to meet for reconciliation anywhere. Amidst both joy and certainty, FNR quickly conducted other leaders of the Naga groups, including the late S. Kaplang, who was in Burma, and Brigadier S. Shinya, who was also in the border between India and Nagaland. Both of them responded positively. Since May 2008, the Forum for Naga Reconciliation and the combined Naga political groups have met many times, at least 12 times in less than 2 years in a different location in Thailand, to be more particular, in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and on different occasions in Nagaland, especially this was between June of 2008 and June of 2009. We had the support given by many of the Naga civil society groups, and the boost came in September 2008 when 47 Naga organizations and church bodies resolved that we must bring the highest level leaders of these Naga political groups at the earliest. Therefore, in response to the call made by the Naga public, the Forum for Naga Reconciliation and the Naga political groups began to lay the groundwork for the Covenant of Reconciliation, known as the COR, which was eventually signed on 13 June 2009 by top leaders that included Mr. Isaac Chisisu, Mr. S. Kaplan, and Brigadier S. Shariat. The result of the signing of the Covenant of Reconciliation was almost immediately positive and palpable. Virtually free from the fear of factional violence, members of the Naga political groups were now able to move freely over ground and reunite with their family members in their own homes. Kaman people began to live and work without fear of being caught in the crossfire of conflict. From social to economic life, there was a newfound sense of relief and safety. People lived freer. They felt freer to mingle and to travel. Shops and restaurants stayed open past previous informal curfews, and everyday life began to bustle. Though the Naga political journey has a way to go before it reaches its destination, the general psyche of the common persons in regard to political conflict is generally positive, especially relative to the particularly restive period in the 1990s and early 2000s. In many corners, people continue to contribute to transformative changes, underscored by an ethos of unity. Reconciliation has indeed led to a collective consciousness. This June marked the 12 years since the signing of the Covenant of Reconciliation. Naga people and non-Nagas living in Naga areas continue to long for a lasting peace, while also anxious for what the future holds. In this, the Forum for Naga Reconciliation continues to advocate for an approach that is proactively imaginative in our own broad potential and possibilities. We also continue our work of promoting unity over division, dialogue over diatribes, and peace over war. As ever, we hope and pray for a just conclusion to the Naga political journey. Thank you.
The situation of religious freedom in the world was already particularly difficult before the COVID-19 pandemic. Just point out that in 1 in 3 countries there are serious violations of religious freedom. But the profound impact of the COVID pandemic has further aggravated the right to religious freedom. In this global emergency, governments have found it necessary to impose extraordinary measures, in some cases applying disproportionate limitations on religious worship, especially when compared to those imposed on other secular activities. It is clear that we are not questioning the existence of an extraordinary situation such as the current pandemic, nor the need for equally extraordinary measures for the care of public health. However, we question in many countries the excessive, unnecessary use of such measures and the indiscriminate way in which they have been taken. Among the rights of religious communities is undoubtedly to worship, not only individually, but collective or community, and to do so according to their own rules and in places appropriate for them. Churches and religious communities have given enormous evidence of concern for the health care of their own and others. It is true that in the face of a serious and imminent danger, the legal systems dictate exceptional procedures, but there is a serious risk that they will affect competences and that this will be left to discretion of the authorities. In any case, the legitimacy of such restrictions must be reasonable and proportionate. Beyond the formal question, even in the case that the restrictions were imposed by law, we must be very alert and see that they are strictly interpreted. The judge in each case must analyze, first, whether the restriction pursues a legitimate objective. Second, whether that objective is specifically pursued and not other used as an excuse. Third, whether the religious freedom restriction is the one that affects the least of those that could be taken. And finally, whether the benefits to be obtained from the restriction is greater than the damage caused to the restricted right. It means that even if there is a legitimate reason in order to restrict religious freedom, such as public care, the government must demonstrate that it meets the requirements of proportionality. Another requirement that must be met is that of non-discrimination. Discrimination occurs when believers are deprived of the right to religious practice, and at the same time, other people are allowed to practice as much or more risky in order to eventually spread the disease. We are not talking here about discrimination between religious groups, which would obviously be intolerable, but about discrimination between believers and non-believers by depriving only the believers of the exercise of a fundamental right, while allowing the non-believers to exercise other rights such as playing sport or exercise the trade, potentially more dangerous for the spread of the disease. In addition, measures restricting a right such as religious freedom must, of course, be reasonable, and the prohibitions imposed by the governments generally are not. Finally, together with legality, proportionality, and reasonableness, an indispensable requirement of validity of any restriction on religious freedom is temporality. They cannot be extended in time unlimitedly. Finally, as we unfortunately know in many parts of the world, faith is violently repressed. But in other countries where rights are discussed, we must be very alert and not indifferent to the new forms that restrictions on religious freedom may take on the pretext of protecting our health. Human health is not only physical, but also spiritual.